The Supreme Court's conservative majority is refusing to extend Wisconsin's deadline to receive mail-in ballots. In a 5-3 ruling, the High Court sided with the state's Republicans. All absentee ballots in Wisconsin must be received by the time polls close at 8 p.m. local time on November 3rd. Democrats had asked for ballots postmarked by Election Day, but received up to 6 days afterwards to count. Several other states, including late-arriving ballots in their final tally. The ruling is critical in a state crucial to both candidates' chances this November. Our CBS News Battleground Tracker rates the Badger State as leaning toward Joe Biden. President Trump won Wisconsin by just 23,000 votes in 2016. So for more on this, let's bring in Cara Korte in Washington. She's a CBS News campaign reporter covering voting and election issues. Cara, welcome. Great to see you. So how are Wisconsin Democrats reacting to this Supreme Court decision? And what do the state's citizens need to know to make sure their vote counts?
Well, this is a loss for Democrats, Tanya. It was the Democratic National Committee that was trying to enforce this 3-day extension of ballots being postmarked by Election Day, but accepted if they come in within that 3-day range. It's a loss for Democrats, but it also caused some consternation with election officials in Wisconsin. Moments after this decision came out last night, the Wisconsin Election Commission, a bipartisan group of election officials, released a statement encouraging voters to ignore the state's rule, which allows for voters to request absentee ballots up to October 29th. And the reason why they were telling people to now ignore that is because the Postal Service suggests voters take at least a week to return a ballot. It can take up to at least 7 days, sometimes more in some states, for a ballot to leave your house and get into the hands of election officials. So we're at that week point now. So if you have a ballot sitting at home and you are in Wisconsin and you want to return it, you should not use the mail at this point. It's too much of a risk. There's no guarantee it'll come in time. You can find a polling place to drop it off. You can find a drop box location to leave your ballot. But right now, Tanya, there are 400,000 outstanding mail ballots that have not yet been turned in Wisconsin. So all of those folks either have the remaining hours of today to send it in, or they're going to have to find an alternative other than the mail to get their vote in.
Deadline is approaching. All right, so Cara, Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, both of whom were put on the court by the president, wrote concurring opinions on the Wisconsin case, laying out how they could rule in a potential voting case over the next few weeks. What can you tell us about that?
This is an important signal possibly coming from Justices Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, Tanya. There's some precedent here to understand how all of this election law is litigated. We can look at a precedent which occurred in Pennsylvania last week, where it was the same kind of matter. There was a lawsuit there dealing with ballot deadlines, and the Supreme Court upheld that decision because Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the liberal side of the bench on that Pennsylvania case. Why does that matter? Because that Pennsylvania case was reinforcing a state Supreme Court decision. And the difference there is that here in Wisconsin, the decision that was reversed by the Supreme Court came from a Wisconsin federal court. And we have seen in past that the Supreme Court has done all they can to uphold state decisions, whether it's coming from a state house, a state legislature, a state Supreme Court. But if decisions come through federal courts, the Supreme Court is more likely to weigh in on those decisions. They're more likely to change it, and that's what happened here in Wisconsin. The decisions coming from Gorsuch and Kavanaugh matter because, A, we know that a new conservative Supreme Court justice has her first day of work today, and that's Amy Coney Barrett. And these decisions that have so far been split amongst party lines means that Republicans will now have a majority in deciding these decisions. And Gorsuch and Kavanaugh wrote yesterday, they cited multiple times Bush v. Gore, which is, of course, the landmark decision that handed the 2000 election over to George W. Bush. And that is something new. We have not seen many election cases refer to Bush v. Gore because it's been so controversial, it's been so ridiculed. But Kavanaugh and Gorsuch are digging their heels into Bush v. Gore, saying that that is a precedent for law, which really worries Democrats moving forward as we see more litigation continue. Even after Election Day, we're going to see cases pop up.
All right, now, returning to the role of the voter here, time is running out if you still haven't registered to vote. Cara, where is registration still open over the next week?
This is important, Tanya, because we talked about this before. Nothing can happen. All of this deadline, voting by mail, voting in person. If you're not registered, you're not getting very far anywhere. So it's important to know when your registration deadline is for some states. Now, today is the registration deadline in Connecticut and Utah. There are multiple ways to register to vote in most states. You can do so in person, online, or by mail. In Connecticut, it's the deadline for mail and online registration. In Utah, it is the in-person deadline. Moving forward, we have more deadlines this week. Thursday, Nevada, a big battleground state. The deadline to register online is Thursday there. Friday, another even bigger battleground, perhaps Wisconsin, which is what we were just talking about. In-person voter registration, the deadline to do that in Wisconsin is Friday, and then on Saturday, more battlegrounds. North Carolina and New Mexico is the deadline to register in those states.
All right, so keep that in mind. Now, also, time is running out to vote early in person. You can't just vote early all the way up to Election Day, right, Cara? So walk us through some of the key deadlines by state this week.
That's right. And this early voting, whether it be through mail or in person, is what we are seeing historic levels of, right? And so in-person deadlines coming up this week to mark on your calendars if you're in these states. Today, Louisiana and Pennsylvania, today are your last days to vote early in person. Moving on to the week on Thursday, Maine and Tennessee is going to be the last days to vote. Friday is a big day. Arizona, Georgia, Idaho, Massachusetts, Nevada, and Texas, which has seen more votes cast than any other state so far this election. Friday is your deadline to vote early in person. And then on Saturday, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Virginia, and West Virginia is your in-person early voting deadline. And then Sunday, closing out the week, more deadlines in Alaska, Delaware, Florida, New York, and the state of the day, Wisconsin. So again, if you are in these states, make sure you have a plan, make sure you know where you're going, and know that it might take a little bit of time, so plan for that, but know the deadlines. Know the deadlines because you want your vote ultimately to count at the end of the day.
Cara Korte, thank you so much for all that very important and practical information for voters. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tanya.